heard my own obituary before I learned how to breathe again. People talk about the smell of death like they've known it all their lives. But the chapel behind St. Brendan's in our coastal Maine town smelled mostly like lilies and salt. Lilies brought in armfuls by friends who thought they were honoring me. Salt from the Atlantic wind curling across the parking lot and under the old wooden doors. The first thing I truly recognized was the rhythm. A single beeping sound from the ambulance idling behind the chapel, the monitor tethered to my pulse to make sure it still had the nerve to continue. Beep, pause, beep. It sounded defiant. I lay swaddled under a thin gray blanket, a paramedic's coat warmed in a dryer thrown across my shivering shoulders, my hair damp against my temples, the fog seeping through everything as if the day had been dipped in it. Inside, someone cleared his throat into a microphone and said my name in the gentle way people say the names of the dead. Mary Thompson was a reader before she was anything else, the pastor said. She shelved the town's stories before she ever told her own. A ripple of laughter moved over the pews like sunlight. I could picture their faces, women from the quilting circle, men who'd asked me for tide charts and found cookbooks tucked under their arms when they left, teenagers who thought librarians didn't understand heartache but took my handwritten lists anyway. They thought I was inside that closed oak casket beneath the stained glass depicting a ship at sea. The paramedic, a young woman with tired eyes and an easy steadiness in her hands, watched the monitor more than she watched me. "Keep breathing, Miss Thompson," she said softly. "Slow and easy, don't fight the air." "I'm not dead," I whispered, and whether it was to her or myself, I don't know. Then a child's voice, sharp and bright as a bell through fog. "Stop, she's alive. Grandma is alive. Look at the date." The doors of the chapel flew open so hard they thudded against the walls. Noah, small, fast, a flash of red sneakers, hair sticking up like he'd run through wind, sprinted down the center aisle, a tablet clutched to his chest. He was 10, and everything about him was motion and purpose. He didn't hesitate or glance at the adults reaching to stop him. He reached the front and thrust the tablet toward the pastor, toward the congregation, toward my stepdaughter and her husband standing near the casket, like proprietors guarding an inventory. "It's the wrong date," Noah said, breathless, voice breaking then holding. "And this certificate is fake. Grandma isn't dead. She wasn't dead last night or this morning. They lied." The monitor behind the chapel kept time with my life. Beep, pause, beep. And just like that, because Noah said a thing that could only be called truth, and because the world sometimes still respects truth, everything about the day, about the plan, about the way my name had been harnessed to money and signatures and silence, began to shift. But this isn't where the story begins. It begins where most of my life settled and grew, on a street that sloped gently toward the harbor, in a house that creaked like a ship and held the kind of quiet you only earn by living inside it for decades. It begins with me, 66 years old, retired librarian of Baxter Harbor Public Library, widow of Robert Thompson, stepmother to Lydia and Peter through Robert's first marriage, mother to my own boy, Ethan, who died the year Noah was born, and keeper of small rituals that mattered to nobody but me. Glass of water on the nightstand, crossword left open to the clue I was saving, cat asleep across my shins like a warm bandage. I have always loved the sound of paper. It's not the brittle crack of old bindings or the stiff whisper of magazine gloss, but the particular hush of a page being turned by someone who needs what's on the other side. Maybe I loved it because I learned young that stories can be the difference between being seen and being invisible. When Robert and I married, the town looked at me with that polite, chilly curiosity they save for second wives who come in with stacks of recipes and a quiet voice. Lydia looked at me like a new book she'd already decided to dislike. Peter less so. He moved to Boston, built a life that looked like new money and polished leather, and visited rarely. Lydia stayed local, a hairstylist who considered herself a businesswoman because she put aesthetics on the sign, and then she married a man who thought rules were invitations. Aaron Wicks, attorney at law, the kind of attorney who buys an Audi before he buys office chairs that don't wobble. He shook hands like his hand had better places to be. When Robert died 2 years ago, Lydia hugged me in the receiving line for exactly 3 seconds and then went to stand beside Aaron, who wore a navy suit and a face of respectful boredom. Noah, who was 8 then, silently took the program from my hand and traced the letters of his grandfather's name with his finger, like he could keep them from evaporating. After, when the casserole dishes were delivered and the neighbors went home, I stood at the kitchen sink and realized grief sometimes arrives like fog. You know it's there because your world loses edges, but you keep moving slowly, hands out, finding your way by familiar things. Familiar things kept me upright. I rose at 6, fed the cat, watched the gulls try to out-argue each other on the dock pilings. I walked to the library just to breathe in the never-changing scent of old wood and dust and the lemon oil I still used on the long circulation desk. I shelved books nobody asked me to shelve. I answered questions nobody asked me to answer. When I closed up, I always left the reading room lamps on, small islands of light you could see from the sidewalk, like a promise. There's a place for you when you need it. It must have taken Lydia exactly 2 weeks after Robert died to decide I needed help. She arrived with Aaron and a bouquet of hydrangeas that had long since given up, pretending to be alive. They sat at my kitchen table, the table where Robert had rolled out pie crust with my grandmother's wooden pin, where Noah had drawn pictures of whales so enormous they needed 2 pieces of paper taped together. Lydia smoothed the front of her floral blouse and looked at me the way people who want something look at clerks in stores. "Mary, you know I love you," she said. And it was so patently untrue that my cat flicked his tail in disbelief. "But we have to get realistic. You're on your own. The house is old, the stairs, winter, you need to let us help." Aaron drew up some simple forms. Durable power of attorney, medical proxy. Nothing changes day to day. It just gives us the ability to step in so you're protected. Aaron slid a folder across the table. His hair, which was of indeterminate brown, had been coaxed into obedience with some expensive product. He smiled, and the smile had the same shine. "These are standard, Mary. Everybody does this. We can notarize them right now. I brought a notary." "Everyone," I said, because I prefer people who ask what they mean. "Do you have power of attorney over your grandmother, Aaron?" He laughed, like I'd made a charming joke. "My grandmother is 90 and in Boca. She's got a boyfriend who thinks Margaritaville is a personality trait. She'd never give anyone power of attorney. But you're sensible." I didn't sign, not because I didn't think about it. Grief makes paperwork feel like kindness. Grief makes other people's confidence feel like shelter, but the form sat on the kitchen counter while I made coffee and then tea, and something in me kept asking why. Why the hurry? Why the notary in the passenger seat of an Audi? I went to see my neighbor, Louise, a retired nurse who smelled faintly of peppermint and betadine and who could tell you which veins were cooperative at a glance. She had delivered half the town in the 70s and held their hands while they left it in the last decade. "You look like you swallowed a lemon," she said when she opened her door. "Lydia brought forms." "Of course she did," Louise said. "People bring forms when they don't know how to bring casseroles." She made tea, the kind that tastes like someone once waved a fruit over hot water. I showed her the documents. She read them with that nurse's frown that means the body might be fine, but the chart is all wrong. "You can sign these if you want," she said finally, "but give medical proxy to someone who loves you more than they love control. And keep your own copies somewhere you don't tell anybody about. People move fast when money is involved." "What money?" I said, half laughing, because I had the house and Robert's pension and my modest savings, and that was enough for me. Louise raised an eyebrow. "The money you're not supposed to think about, the life insurance. Did Robert keep anything from his first marriage? Policies are like weeds. They slip between the stones and take root." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark listening to the wind push ocean smell through my window screens and tried to count the things Lydia had asked for since the funeral. House keys, bank statements, my phone password, access to the library alarm code, just in case I stopped by to dust. Noah came the next afternoon after school. He let himself in because even at 10, he knocked like a question. His backpack was heavier than it had any right to be, and his cheeks were flushed like he'd raced the bus door. He hugged me hard enough to knock the breath from my chest, and then he stepped back and looked at me like he looks at the Lego sets at the toy store he doesn't expect to get but loves anyway. "Can I make garlic toast?" he said. "Mom says I shouldn't use the broiler by myself, but you're not Mom." "High praise," I said. "Absolutely. Garlic toast for 2 and the cat if he begs." While the bread browned, Noah tugged at the strap of his backpack like it was telling him a secret. "Grandma, Lydia told Mom you're getting a new doctor, a special one. Is that good?" "Probably not," I said, because Noah is the person in the family most likely to forgive me for telling the truth. "Who is he?" "Someone at Harbor Health. Dr. Calder. Mom says he's the one who signed off on Mr. Emery going to the memory place, even though he still remembered the Patriots' scores." "Perhaps Dr. Calder believes football is the measure of a person," I said lightly. But the way Noah's mouth turned down, the way his hands tightened on the strap of the backpack settled heavy on me. "What else, kiddo?" He shrugged. "Lydia came to our house and told Mom you're slipping, that you left the stove on, but you always set the timer, and she took a picture of your handwriting and sent it to Mom. She said your signature looks shakier, and that's a sign your brain is getting—" What did she say? "Fuzzy." I thought about the pen I'd used to sign for a package yesterday, how the barrel was thicker than my favorite pilot, how the delivery man had made some joke about hand cramps. My signature had looked like mine, only wearing winter gloves. I took a slow breath. "I'm okay, Noah. I promise I'll tell you if I'm not." He nodded because he is the kind of child who understands the difference between promises and fears. A week later, Lydia came again, with Aaron and a new bouquet and the notary. They brought coffee this time, from a place with cups so thick they made your teeth ache, and cupcakes with frosting like architecture. I thought about all the food people bring when they want to soften you, and how much sharper you have to be when you're full. I poured the coffee, I offered plates, I listened. Aaron gave me what he pretended was a conspiratorial look. "We also made a few calls, Mary. There's a benefit you can use if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, an accelerated death benefit. It's part of your policy. It helps pay for care. We can make sure—" "I'm not terminally ill," I said. "Of course," Aaron said, "but if Dr. Calder finds anything we should plan for—" He let it hang there, a foggy suggestion, the kind you can almost believe you thought up yourself. "I'll meet your Dr. Calder," I said, "but I'm not signing anything today." Lydia's smile cracked at the edges like paint over bad drywall. "Mary," she said softly, "don't make this harder." "I'll try to make it exactly the difficulty it deserves," I said, and I saw her flinch at the librarian in my voice, the one that doesn't fool around with late fees or boys who dog-ear pages. They scheduled the appointment. I wore my good sweater and the jeans that still fit like they remembered my body. Louise came with me because some people bring weapons to fights, and some people bring friends who know how to weigh pills in their palms. Harbor Health smelled like glass cleaner and salt. There was a coffee station that dispensed hot water that tasted like it remembered coffee slightly. Dr. Calder was younger than I'd expected, with a beard that looked as if it had been added afterwards by costume. He shook my hand and made a big show of reading my chart. "Memory concerns," he said in the same tone a mechanic says, "You've been ignoring the oil light." He handed me a clipboard with a test and watched my hands the way I watch students who swear they're not on their phones. "I'm a retired librarian," I said. "I can remember the Dewey Decimal number for quilting without thinking. Do I get extra credit?" He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me today's date." I did. He asked what town we were in, how to spell world backwards, how to draw a clock at 2:10. I drew the clock, hands steady, numbers evenly spaced, and watched his eyebrows. He frowned anyway. He asked about medications. I told him I take one for blood pressure and the occasional ibuprofen when my knee predicts rain. He nodded and typed and then asked how my sleep had been lately. "Like a cat on a windowsill," I said. He wrote something I did not think meant peaceful. He ordered lab work and a scan just to be safe and sent me home with 3 amber bottles. "Supplements," he said. "You can pick them up at the clinic desk. They'll help with focus and sleep." Louise took the bottles from me before I could unscrew anything. She tipped the capsules into her palm. "No labels," she said. "That's illegal." "The clinic bottles are labeled," I said, "and these are not," Louise said. "Put them somewhere you can point to later. Do not swallow anything a man hands you in a room with a leather chair and a diploma with his name in calligraphy. Call me if you feel strange. Better yet, call me before you take anything he gave you." She leaned in. "And please, Mary, don't go to any appointments without me or someone who knows how to say no louder than you." The next morning, the world tasted like pennies. My mouth was thick and dry and my fingertips tingled as if they'd been asleep and were inventing pins and needles. I hadn't taken the pills. Louise had them. But when I poured my coffee, it smelled rancid. I took a sip anyway because habit is stronger than disgust, and the room tilted a little. I set the mug down. The cat raised his head. The house seemed to step back from me. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair and waited for the wave to pass. It didn't. The phone rang and rang. When it finally stopped, someone knocked. "Mary?" Lydia's voice sweetened with concern. "Mary, it's your favorite daughter-in-law. We brought muffins." The room was too bright. The lines around the window frames were too sharp and then too fuzzy. "Come in," I called. "Door's open." Lydia was lavender in a cloud. Lotion, detergent, something sprayed on out of a can. Aaron was gray suit, gray voice. A third person stood behind them. Woman, 40 maybe, hair scraped into a bun, cardigan the color of oatmeal. "Hi, Mary," she said brightly. "I'm Dana. I help families through transitions. Lydia thought it'd be useful to meet." Transitions, I thought, as if my life were a runway and they were steering me toward a different gate. But my mouth was too dry for jokes. Aaron set the muffins on the counter and uncapped a water bottle with a flourish like a magician about to pull out a dove. "Drink," he said. And I took it because I was thirsty, and because refusing would have started a fight, I wasn't awake enough to finish. The water tasted fine. My head drifted away from me like something untethered, the edges of things rounded. Lydia sat across from me and put her hand on mine. "You're safe," she said. "We've got you." Dana opened a folder thick with forms. "These are just provisional," she said. "Emergency medical proxy, temporary guardianship, so we can get you an appointment at Bayview Memory Care for an assessment. It's easier if—" "Bayview," I said through a mouth that had forgotten how to pick up consonants. "I'm not that tired." "Of course not," Lydia said. "This is just for safety. For the winter, the stairs, the stove. You left the stove on yesterday, didn't you?" The neighbors smelled gas. "I set a timer," I said, but my voice sounded like mine in the next room. The kitchen clock ticked very loudly, and beneath it, the baseboard heater gave a soft, metallic ping as it warmed. Noah's voice landed on the porch. He knocked even while he opened the door. "Grandma, I have to show you something for science. It's about whales. Did you know their heartbeats can be so slow they—" He stopped. The way he stopped made my heart stubborn itself into a steady beat. Beep. The monitor behind the chapel would say later, but here, in my kitchen, it was a thud, heavy and welcome. Noah looked at Lydia, at Aaron, at Dana, and then at me. And in his face, I saw the exactness of children, the way they notice when water tastes different and grown-ups have wrong smiles, and something about Tuesday is more dangerous than Monday. "Hey, buddy," Lydia said brightly. "We're just helping Grandma sign some things so she doesn't have to worry." Noah set his backpack down very, very carefully. "Grandma, can I have a glass of water?" "Of course," I said, though the words were sluggish. He got a glass. He poured from the tap. He smelled it. He looked at the water bottle Aaron had opened and then at the sink again. He took a sip from the glass, then poured it into the sink. Then he poured fresh water and handed it to me. "I read you need to drink tap water sometimes because it has minerals," he said loudly for the room to hear. I took a sip. It tasted like our town, iron and old pipes, a little salt from the air if you were fanciful. It tasted like me. Aaron frowned, but only briefly. He pushed the forms closer. "We'll just need your signature here and here," he said. Noah pulled a sheet of paper from his backpack. "Grandma, can you sign this permission slip for a field trip? Mrs. Alvarez said I could bring it today." Dana's eyebrows twitched, a small movement like a rabbit considering the path. Lydia smiled without teeth. "Noah," she said, Your grandmother is tired. I'll sign it, I said, and Noah slid the paper over shakily, his hands suddenly clumsy, like the paper had tripled in weight. I picked up my pen. Noah watched my hand. I signed his field trip form slowly and precisely, the way I learned to sign things when Robert and I refinanced the house. No flourish, no slop. Noah's shoulders lowered. He slid the paper back into his backpack and then, suddenly, stumbled. The backpack crashed to the floor. Papers spilled. A flash drive in a cheap plastic case skittered under the table and came to rest against Aaron's shoe. Aaron's expression tightened and then smoothed. "Let me help you with that, champ," he said, bending, but Noah was faster. He scooped the flash drive up, tucked it in his fist, and went very, very still. "Oops," he said, "hands are slippery. Can I use the bathroom?" Lydia's voice had just the tiniest edge. "Make it quick." He went. I heard the bathroom door close. I heard the cabinet open under the sink because our house yowled a complaint about that joint in the wood. I heard the window slide up an inch because that window always sticks and then gives. I heard Noah inhale and then exhale, the way people breathe when they've decided not to drown. "Mary," Dana said, softer now, gentler the way some people get right before they push. "We want you to be comfortable. We want your life to be easy." "Life isn't supposed to be easy," I said. "It's supposed to be worth it." Lydia's mouth tightened. "Sign the forms," she said, the lacquered sweetness stripped away. "Stop making this hard." I didn't. Aaron stood, impatient, and then the phone rang. Louise's voice on my answering machine filled the room, loud as a lifeguard's whistle. "Mary, I'm at the clinic. Dr. Calder's samples are wrong. You did not get what he said you did. I need you to call me, right now." Aaron moved toward the answering machine, as if you can push a voice back into a box. "Old technology," he joked. "So loud." "Noah," Lydia called down the hall. "We're leaving." He reappeared, face composed, the flash drive tucked away somewhere I couldn't see. "Okay," he said. "Grandma, I'll come later for the whales." When they left, the house exhaled. Louise arrived 10 minutes later, out of breath and furious. She took one look at me and went straight to the sink, rinsed a glass, filled it, and pressed it into my hand. "Drink," she said. "Then pack a bag. We're going to the ER. I don't care if we sit there for 6 hours. Your blood pressure is wrong and your pupils look like saucers." We went. In the waiting room of St. Brendan S., old men debated whether the Red Sox would ever again be the Red Sox, and a little girl wore a plastic crown and sang softly to herself. The fluorescent lights hummed like anxious bees. The nurse who took my vitals had a face like an unbothered moon. 1 to 10, she said. "Pain?" 2, I said truthfully. "Fear is a 7. She looked at me over the top of her tablet. "I like you." Then she inserted an IV, sent me to a CT, and told me to close my eyes and think about Maine in summer. I thought about library summer reading charts. I thought about Noah on the dock, listening for whales like he could hear them breathing from shore. I thought about Lydia's hand on mine, too careful, and Aaron's fingers stained with printer ink. By midnight, I had a bed on a quiet floor and an old television playing a documentary about lighthouses with the sound off. Louise went home to feed her neighbor's cat and promised to return at dawn. I slept, or rather, I lay with my eyes closed and counted the whir of the IV pump as if it were a very slow metronome. Someone entered my room around 3 a.m. They moved like people move who expect approval for moving quietly. I didn't open my eyes. I listened. The curtain whisked. There was the soft clatter of something plastic, the prickle of my skin recognizing a new presence. The person leaned close. The smell of lavender drifted in, heavy and throat-catching. "Lydia." "Mary," she whispered, "you're okay. We're going to make sure you're okay." Fabric rustled. The IV line shifted. I opened my eyes. "Don't," I said. "Don't touch that." She smiled as if we were on a stage and I had just missed my line. "Shh," she said. And she reached toward the line again, toward the bag hanging there, labeled by a nurse whose handwriting looked like hope. I pressed the call button. The nurse arrived with the kind of speed that suggests the universe sometimes sends the right person at the right time. Lydia straightened. hand half raised like a child caught with chalk. "Just fixing a twist," she said. The nurse was not charmed. "Family waits in the lounge," she said. "You don't touch lines." Lydia's eyes flashed, the kind of flash you see in predators and some politicians. "I'm her proxy," she said. "No," I said as loudly as I could. "She is not." At 9 a.m., Aaron arrived with a man I'd never met. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, and an expression he likely practiced in the mirror, composed and expensive. "I'm Mr. Larkin," he said, "from the funeral home." "At 9 a.m.? I said. He blinked. "Of course not now. We just wanted to introduce ourselves." I could feel the edges of the world stiffen again, like starch in old linen. I glanced at Louise, who had returned with fresh coffee and the look of a woman who would happily fight anyone in this building if it would help. She lifted her chin at me. I lifted mine back. "You can introduce yourself on a day when we don't expect to need you," I said. That afternoon, Dr. Calder appeared in my doorway, beard trimmed, eyes as calm as a pond with no fish. "Preliminary scan looks like we should plan," he said vaguely. "I'll write orders. We'll make you comfortable." "Comfortable like a child's nightlight," I said, "or comfortable like slipping powders in people's drinks in the 1920s. He tipped his head, amused. "You read too much," he said. "There's no such thing," I said. He wrote anyway. 2 days later, something changed. The hospitalist I'd liked, the one with the freckled arms and the way of saying, "From what I know of you so far, you're too stubborn to die," was replaced on the board by a name I didn't recognize. That night, Aaron stood too close to my bed and smiled at the nurse as if she were a waitress. He had papers with him. He had a folder that looked identical to the folder he'd slid across my kitchen table, only heavier. "Mary," he said, voice pitched low as if he were telling me a secret. "I'm sorry to be the one, but we need to think about next steps. We have a dignified plan, a celebration of your life, a way to spare you suffering. The doctors agree. You sign this DNR." He held up a photocopy of a form that bore my name, but not my signature. Close, but close, is not it. If you signed as many cards as I did for library donors, if you wrote your name above desk drawers for 30 years because it was funny and it was mine, you know how you cross your T, and how you curl your Y, and how people who don't know you try to mimic confidence with pressure. That is not my hand, I said calmly. My heart was not calm. It had become a fist. It thudded once, twice, the kind of thud that says, "Listen to me." "And I am not dying today." Aaron's smile tightened. "Of course," he said smoothly, "of course, but it's good to be prepared." Noah came that night, even though visiting hours were over. He came the way children sneak out of houses and books, through a window with a screen that slides quietly and a map of the hallway made with stubborn care. He slipped through my door like a thought and stood there, eyes huge, practically vibrating. "Grandma," he whispered, "I found files on Aaron's laptop. He was at our house talking to Mom in the kitchen. He left his bag. I asked to use the computer for homework and he said no, and then he took a call and left the room and I did it anyway." "Noah," I said, because I had to. Because there are ways to be a good grandmother even when your life is being rearranged by other people's hands. "I know," he said, "but listen." He pulled the flash drive from his pocket. He held it up like it was the last match in the world. I found a folder named Castor, like the insurance company, and inside it was a subfolder named ABR M. Thompson. It has PDFs. The accelerated death benefit. It has something called a preliminary death certificate. They filled it out already. The date is, he swallowed, shook his head, took a breath. "It's tomorrow." For a second, everything in the room was sound. The slow, faithful whoosh of the blood pressure cuff, inflating and deflating on the patient in the next bed, the squeak of the cart the night nurse pushed past the door, the far-off clatter of a metal tray. Noah's face swam in front of me, brave and 10, and I said the only thing that mattered. "Good boy," I said. "Good boy, Noah. Give it to Mom. Give it to Jenna and then to the police if you have to. Don't bring it back to Lydia. Don't tell her you have it." He nodded like a soldier, and then, because he is still a child, he crawled into the skinny chair beside my bed and put his head on my arm and fell asleep. The next day, the date in the PDF, was clear and blue-edged, the kind of February day in Maine that pretends summer is closer than it is. A nurse I didn't know came in with an injection. "Something to calm you," she said. "No," I said, and she blinked. "Who ordered it?" She rattled a name I didn't recognize, a last-minute on-call doctor with no reason to think my refusal mattered. I pressed the call button. I asked for the hospitalist. I asked for the charge nurse. I asked for Louise. It turns out, if you ask for the right things in the right voice, even tired people who don't have time listen. Louise arrived with a fierce calm and a clipboard of her own. She read the order, top lip lifting like she'd caught a bad smell. "Absolutely not," she said. "Mary is alert and oriented ×3, and nobody is drugging her into submission on my watch." By afternoon, Jenna, my daughter-in-law, Ethan's widowed wife and Noah's mother, had gone to the police with the flash drive. The police had gone to the district attorney with the flash drive. The DA had called the hospital. Somewhere between all of this, Aaron's Audi sped in circles, and Lydia's smile got the brittle sheen of sugar you heat too far. By evening, though, my room was quiet again, and quiet can be dangerous. A different nurse came in with a paper for me to sign, a scheduling consent for a transfer. "To hospice?" I asked. She glanced at the ceiling and then at her shoes, and I saw the smallness of her, the way she'd chosen this job because she believes helping people is right, and how, today, somebody told her to carry water for the wrong people. "I don't sign anything right now," I said. "I listen to my heart. I wait for the law to catch up." At 4 a.m, alarms trilled down the hall and the understaffed ward became a tide of scrubs and worried eyes. In the commotion, a figure slipped into my room and pulled the curtain. Lavender again. Lydia. I didn't close my eyes. I watched her watch the hallway. She pulled a small vial from her purse, the kind I've seen midwives use and teens use, and women on TV shows use when they want to look like they know what medicine is. Her hand trembled just once. She opened my IV port and brought the vial near. "Stop," I said, and the word was not loud, but it was distinct and it was mine. Her eyes met mine. For a second, I saw something I had never seen in her. Not greed, not disdain, but simple exhaustion from carrying a lie that had outgrown her. Then it vanished. She straightened and pressed her lips together. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "No," I said, "I know exactly what I'm not doing." She left the way people leave when they're still certain they own the next hour. At 7, a paramedic named Deshawn, who had a laugh that made your chest loosen, came to my room with the charge nurse and a piece of paper that said, "Transfer." Louise stood at the foot of my bed, arms folded. "Where?" I said. "ER for observation," the charge nurse said. "Just for a bit." I was not delighted. I was, however, alive and irritated, and both of those feelings kept the room anchored. They brought me downstairs. The ER was a small city of its own. People in pain and people pretending, people frightened because they should be, and people calm because they had practiced. Deshawn clipped the monitor to my finger and recorded my name into his tablet. "Mary Thompson, 66, he said. "And for the record, very much breathing." "Write that down in ink," I said. The DA called while I sat there. The DA who'd been to my library to read at story time and had a voice that could either soothe or cut, depending on what the day needed. She spoke to the hospital administrator, she spoke to the funeral home, she spoke to the police station where Aaron and Lydia had been for voluntary questions, which is what people say right before they ask a lawyer to be present. By noon, the church bells at St. Brendan's pealed 11, then 12, then once more for the half hour as if time could be wrung into behaving. The funeral home had scheduled a celebration of life for me at 1, which is grotesquely efficient for a woman breathing in an ER 15 minutes away. Deshawn glanced up when he heard where I was supposed to be. "You want to see them?" he asked. "Want to hear what people say about you when they think you're not listening?" "No," I said. "I want to hear one voice that matters." At 12:45, Jenna texted, "We have it. We have everything. If they try to start without proof, we will stop it." Noah is coming with me. He promised to walk, not run. I told him he can't promise things like that, and he said he can if it's to make sure you hear something important. We left the hospital with a police escort that looked like a favor and a warning. Deshawn drove like someone who knows ambulances get ignored when people don't want to stop at red lights. He parked behind the chapel, engine idling. He put a blanket around my shoulders. "You stay here," he said. "You're off stage for now. Let them mess up on their own." I lay there listening to the beeping, to the muffled sound of people singing, "It is well with my soul," to the rhythmic sigh of my own breath like waves. And then Noah's voice knifed through the air, true and high and unashamed. "Stop, she's alive, look at the date." There was rustling like a flock lifting from a field. The doors thumped open. Lydia's voice rose first, ragged and almost feral. "Noah, stop it, come here. This is not appropriate." Aaron tried to take the tablet, and Noah held on with the strength of 10-year-old conviction. "It's right here," he said. "It's dated today. It says my grandma died at 6:45 this morning, and I had pancakes with her at 7 last night, and she asked if I liked the maple better from Haggerty's or Turner's, and I said Haggerty's because they give you the little glass bottle." There was laughter, exactly one burst, instantly shamed into silence. The pastor said, "Perhaps we should," and stopped because he saw something he could not possibly have expected. The DA, in the doorway, with the police chief, and behind them, Louise, who had put on her church sweater and her fight face. "Nobody moves," the DA said, which is a sentence I have only heard on television and once at the library when a toddler stuck his head between the rails of the staircase and panicked. "Grandma," Noah said again, and I heard his sneakers slap the tile and then the stamp of a child who refuses to be redirected. "Grandma, the date is wrong. They were going to take your money. They were going to take your house. They were going to pretend you were gone so they could be rich. But you're not gone." The DA said something to the police chief sotto voce, and then the two of them moved with the confidence of people who had decided an hour ago to save a woman from being erased. They approached Aaron. He had his hands up like he was negotiating with a skittish dog. "There is a misunderstanding," he said, as if that word could be a net. Lydia began to cry, the ugly cry that comes from the throat of desperation, and for a moment, a small part of me, the part that remembers she was once a tiny girl with a bowl cut and a too big backpack, felt a pinch of pity. Then the DA walked down the aisle and said clearly, "Mary Thompson is alive. The preliminary death certificate is fraudulent. The accelerated benefit paperwork is fraudulent. The hospital is cooperating. The insurance company is on the line. This service is over." A murmur rose like a wind through trees. A hand touched my arm. "Deshawn." "You ready to stand up?" he asked. "I've been ready for weeks," I said. He helped me sit. The world did not tilt. He wrapped the blanket tighter and guided me to the doors. I didn't go inside the chapel. I stood in the doorway, lit from behind like a ghost in a bedtime story, and breathed the lily salt air like it was the first good air of spring. The room gasped. People are very dramatic when ghosts interrupt their morning. Then, the strangest thing. Silence. The kind that includes shock and awe and anger and grief and relief braided together. Noah ran to me and threw himself at my waist, and I bent and held him and felt his heartbeat thumping a wild counterpoint to my steady one. Jenna reached us next and folded her arms around both of us, her face wet and fierce. Louise stood behind them like a wall. Lydia's tears stopped. She stood very still. Then she said evenly and with something like amazement, "You're not dead." "No," I said. "And if you had waited for the paramedics instead of a notary, this whole mess would be easier to explain." Aaron started to talk then, to the DA, to the pastor, to the heir, to anyone who would hold his words in their hands. "We were misled," he said. "Dr. Calder assured us. There was confusion. Aaron," the DA said, "no." The police chief stepped forward. "You're both coming with us," he said. "We have questions you can answer at the station. You can answer them with counsel or without. We also have a warrant for Dr. Calder's office." "Good," Louise said in a voice like flint. "They took them away, not in handcuffs because this is Maine, and the chief believes in dignity even for people who tried to burn it down, but escorted with seriousness." The pastor cleared his throat and said bravely, "Friends, this is most unusual, but perhaps we can," and trailed off because he is a man who knows when a day has taken a turn only God can manage. I didn't speak then. I let people touch my sleeve and my wrist and my hair, the way people touch the living like they need proof. I let Mrs. Emery, who wears her dead husband's watch under her sweater because she likes the weight of a wrist on her wrist, cup my face and say, "You look like the library does in a storm, Mary. Light on in the windows, stubborn." I nodded. Stubborn is a word that sits in my mouth like a peppermint. Later, after statements and after soup, and after the kind of tired that makes your bones feel like clothes hangers, I sat on my couch under a quilt my grandmother made from old skirts and shirts worn thin by women with lives, and I listened to the night. The harbor made small harbor sounds. The neighbor's dog barked at the fog like it could scare it away. Noah slept in the recliner because he refused to go home, and it turned out I refused to let him. My cat took possession of my feet like the monarch he is. Louise sat in the armchair and didn't pretend she wasn't keeping watch. "What could have happened?" Jenna asked finally, the quiet broken, because quiet can keep you from healing if you hold it too long. If Noah hadn't found the drive, if the DA didn't believe us, if, Louise said, is a word that can eat you alive. She looked at me. Tell them. I told them. Not just about the water that tasted wrong, or the pills with no labels, or the men in suits who wear concern like cologne. I told them about grief, making you want to lay your head in anybody's lap who says they'll hold you. I told them about the signing routine of women who have signed things their whole lives for other people. I told them how easy it would have been to be tired one day and not ask the extra question. I told them about truth. The next weeks were a stretch of days with edges. The DA called, the police called, St. Brendan's called to say the pastor hoped to never preside over his own resurrection scene again, but would if necessary. The insurance company called, in a voice so smooth it could have been poured over ice, to say they would cooperate fully and expected cooperation in return. You mean you want me not to talk to the press about how quickly you accepted a preliminary death certificate for a woman whose pulse you could have found by calling her house, I said. The voice on the other end of the line cleared his throat and put me on hold, the corporate version of kneeling. Dr. Calder disappeared for 48 hours and then was discovered at a motel near the highway with a suitcase full of cash and a notebook long on meticulous numbers and short on morality. It turns out that greed looks the same in any lighting, fluorescent or sunset, hallway or bedside. Aaron hired a lawyer with a whiter smile than his and gave interviews that used words like tragic misunderstanding and deep concern and miscommunication with the hospitalist. Lydia didn't give interviews. She sat in her mother's kitchen with the curtains drawn and read comments on Facebook until her eyes burned. Louise told me these things because she believes you have to look in the face of the thing that tried to take you if you want to recognize it next time when it dresses differently. I couldn't avoid seeing Lydia because we live in a small town and because my life had been braided with hers whether we liked it or not. When she called and asked to come over, Jenna stood up like a shield. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I said, "but I know myself better when I say yes." Lydia arrived alone. Her hair was gathered in a ponytail that had given up. She wore no makeup, and there is something about the face of a woman without the armor she is used to that makes you understand how much weight armor carries. She sat at my kitchen table and looked at her hands and then at me. "I have told this story so many ways in my head," she said. "In the one where I'm the hero, I saved you from something you didn't know how to face. In the one where I'm the villain, I wanted your house more than I wanted you. I don't know which one is true. Both can be a little true," I said, "and neither. What do you want me to say?" "That I didn't try to kill you," she said, flinching at her own words. "That I was trying to help and I got caught up." "In money," I said softly. "In the way money looks like help when you want it to. In fear," she said, "of being poor, of being nothing, of watching Aaron be disappointed in me again and again like I was failing at a game I didn't choose. You could have come to me," I said, "for money, for help, for anything. I would have said yes to many things that didn't require me to die." She laughed, a short, strangled sound, then put her hands to her face and cried. I have never been good at watching people cry if I have hands and tissues and the memory of rocking a baby who didn't know how to stop. I brought a box of Kleenex and sat with her. The cat hopped onto the table and placed one paw on Lydia's forearm like a very small priest. She kept crying, then she stopped. Then she looked at me as if she was ready to be seen. "I am sorry," she said. The words were not enough. They were also all there is. "Not to me," I said after a moment, "or not only to me." I thought of Noah standing in church yelling the truth. I thought of Jenna going to the police because she believes in grown-up things like consequences. "You owe apologies to my grandson, to your brother, though he wouldn't take one if you offered to wrap it, to the town, to yourself." She nodded. "I'm going to talk," she said, "to whomever the DA wants me to talk to. I can't go back." "No," I said, "but you can go forward." We were quiet. I looked at Lydia and saw someone who had built herself out of the wrong materials: men's approval, money, the feeling of being slightly above the person next to her, and wondered if you could rebuild without tearing everything down. I decided you could. I decided that is what we are always doing, living in a house while rearranging the beams. The hearing came. It happened in the Sutton County Courthouse, where the floors are so old they shine from the polishing feet of given them. The judge was a woman who used to come into the library with a stack of romance novels and one book about moths every spring. She wore her robe like a garment knit from authority and patience. The DA spoke. The defense spoke. Aaron's lawyer said miscommunication again. Lydia's new counsel asked the court to consider her client's fear and the control an older, more experienced man exerted over her. He said Aaron had kept keys to Lydia's voice in his pocket for years. When it was my turn to speak, the bailiff handed me a Bible, and I placed my palm on it, not because I thought God required it to recognize me, but because I wanted to remember all the grandmothers whose stories were kept in that book because they wrote them in the margins of faith. "I'm Mary Thompson," I said. "I am alive. I want to say that first because it matters most. I am also angry. I am angry that grief is a thing people climb into like a bowl, and it is so easy to drown in. I am angry that women sign papers for the comfort of others and not themselves. I am angry that the smell of lilies will never be the same for me. I don't want jail for anybody. I want a town that looks out for each other harder. I want the hospital to stop pretending it doesn't know nurses save lives. I want every notary to ask themselves who benefits. I want my grandson to keep believing adults will do the right thing because we will show him. That's all." It was not all, but it was what I had in that room. The judge listened, and then she spoke in the precise manner of people who know their words will be weighed and measured. There were charges: fraud, conspiracy, attempted assault. There were consequences: fines, probation, a suspended sentence contingent on cooperation for Lydia, jail time for Aaron, the beginning of a longer process for Dr. Calder, and the network the DA believed he belonged to. There was a restitution order that looked like a list of names of people the defense had forgotten, had names. The judge also ordered something else: community education sessions at the library about medical proxies, powers of attorney, and how to recognize when the person who brings you cupcakes is trying to take your life while convincing you they are saving it. I went back to the library the next Monday. I unlocked the door and breathed in the lemon sawdust sun smell. I turned on the desk lamp. I taped a sign on the front window that said in black marker, "We have forms and we have friends. Ask for both." People came in steady as rain, women in cardigans with their sisters, men in work jackets with their wives, teenagers with grandparents who have always outlived the ordinary. They asked questions like, "How do I keep my doctor honest?" And "What is a proxy?" And "How do we make sure no one pretends I signed something I didn't?" We printed sample forms. We wrote numbers on index cards. We told stories. We listened to more. Noah started a club with 2 other kids whose grandmothers needed them. They called it the first witnesses because they liked the sound of it. They taught each other how to make cloud backups and how to disable Face ID if somebody was sleeping and how to tell a grown-up you love them by saying no to them. They met in the corner by the local history shelf and drew whales with pens that smelled like blueberries because our town is incapable of not turning even serious things into New England. One afternoon, after a workshop where a woman named Elaine cried with relief because she'd thought she had to sign everything anyone ever put in front of her, I walked down to the harbor with Louise. It was late March, the last dirty snow melting into the grass, the hillsides the color of wet slates. The gulls were arguing about a French fry someone had dropped. Louise rubbed her hands together and said, "You look like the tide just came in." "I feel like the tide waits for no one," I said, "and I am learning to walk in wet sand." She elbowed me gently. "You are learning to be a little mean," she said. "I like it." "I am learning to recognize hands," I said. "Who holds and who takes." We sat on the bench and watched a boat named Second Chance tie up. A man in a red cap hopped to the dock and tossed a line. He had the look of a person who has decided to like his own company. Louise sighed. "We are, after all, doing something right," she said. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I used the fountain pen Robert gave me on our 5th anniversary, the one that leaks if you breathe on it wrong. I wrote about signatures and hands and children who say the thing nobody wants to admit. I wrote about lilies and salt and beeping monitors that say "not today." I wrote about the feeling of being almost erased and the way it feels when someone takes a pencil and traces you back in, carefully, so that you look like yourself again. A week later, Lydia came by again. She had a list of community service hours and a shadowed face. She stood in my doorway and asked if she could come in. I nodded. She handed me a letter. "It's for Noah," she said. "Read it first if you want." I didn't. "I trust him to tell me if it's a letter he wants to keep," I said. We sat. She told me about her meetings, about telling the truth to strangers who write it down. She told me she started sweeping hair at her own salon again because it felt holy to do something that made a small thing cleaner. She said, "I don't know how to be someone different." "You don't have to," I said. "You only have to be someone true." She stared at me, disbelieving and hopeful both at once. "Is that possible?" she asked. "It is harder," I said, "but most possible things are." She left. I put the letter in a drawer for Noah. I made tea. The cat leapt onto the counter and then off as if to remind me he was a cat and I was his human, and that was the end of it. The house creaked. It was the sound of a long life adjusting around a new weight. And then time did what it always does. It passed. The town held bake sales and town meetings and baseball games where children threw themselves at grounders like they were trying to embrace the earth. The library's ceiling leaked during a thunderstorm, and we set up buckets and read by the sound of drops. Louise fell for a man who wore plaid like a suit of armor and made cinnamon rolls that could unharden a heart. Jenna laughed again in a way that sounded like the person she was before she had to be brave. Noah grew an inch and then another, and his voice started to graze lower notes, and he got taller than my refrigerator. He learned he liked coding and whales and girls who didn't pretend not to like things. Every now and then, strangers would recognize me at the grocery store. "You're that woman," they'd say, as if there were one. I'd nod. "Yes," I said, "I'm that woman." Sometimes they'd ask me what I'd learned. I'd tell them the easiest part. Do not sign anything you didn't read twice. Do not swallow anything you didn't choose. Do not let anyone light candles for you before you've decided you want the light. But the harder part is this. Truth often comes out of small mouths. Believe the child who runs up the aisle shouting with his whole chest, because sometimes that is the siren we need. On the anniversary of the day I was almost erased, I walked to the chapel. It was empty. The lilies replaced by a pot of stubborn chrysanthemums someone had forgotten to water. The stained glass ship still tilted into the wind, sails full. I sat in the back pew. I listened to the building breathe. I said thank you out loud, to Deshawn and the DA and Louise and Jenna and to Noah most of all. I said it to myself too, because there is a moment in every story where the person at the center chooses whether to be the person at the center. I chose. I chose to live. I chose, over and over when paper slid toward me, and people said words like just and only and temporary to keep my hand. On my way out, I saw the pastor in the side yard collecting fallen branches after a nor'easter had shrugged its way through. He straightened and waved. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "good to see you upright." "Good to be upright," I said. He looked toward the harbor where the fog was burning off like a promise kept. "I read a line lately," he said. "It was about the dead teaching the living, and then I thought sometimes the almost dead do a better job. I will put that in the library newsletter," I said. He grinned. "Put it under community notes." I walked home. The wind lifted my hair. A child on a bicycle called hello. I picked up a piece of trash someone had left on the sidewalk and tucked it into my pocket, because caring for where you live so it can care for you back is a habit. When I turned onto my street, Noah stood in my yard with a camera around his neck. He was taller than last spring and stronger, and still Noah in the best ways. He pointed the lens at the porch and lowered it again. "I wanted to take a picture of your house," he said. "For a project. We're supposed to photograph places that survived. Make sure you get the library too," I said, "and Louise's cinnamon rolls, and your mother's laugh, and the ambulance behind the chapel." He lifted the camera. "Say accelerated death benefit is a scam," he said. And I laughed so hard the cat leapt onto the windowsill to see if I was okay. After dinner, I sat with my notebook and wrote a few more lines, because you can never have too many lines ready for when you need them. I wrote, "Blood doesn't keep families honest. Truth does," I wrote. "The person who tells you it's your duty is often telling you it's their benefit." I wrote, "I will listen for the sound that belongs to me, my heartbeat, my breath, the beep of a monitor that says continue, and I will answer it." I wrote, "If you are ever the person lying in the ambulance behind the chapel while people speak your name as if your blood had gone cold, listen for the children. They will tell you what time it is. They will tell you to get up, and if you can, get up. I don't know where this story travels after it leaves my mouth. I don't know whose kitchen table it crosses or whose bedside it sits beside. I do know this. If you are the one on the brink, if people have placed papers in front of you and said sign and don't think, if they have changed the date to make it fit the money they want, you can stop. You can say no with a voice that shakes, and it won't matter that it shakes. You can ask for someone to read with you. You can wait for the person who loves you more than they love control. And if you are the person who runs, bare knees, red sneakers, ridiculous courage, down an aisle where adults are quiet because quiet is easier than conflict, run, shout, show the date, hold the tablet like it's truth itself. You might stop a whole town from burying a woman who isn't done telling her story. If you were sitting at my kitchen table right now, if the room smelled faintly of garlic toast and ocean and the pencil shavings from Noah's homework, I'd ask you a question, because that's what libraries teach you to do, to lend questions the way you lend books. If you were in my place, if you woke under a thin blanket to the sound of your own name in the tents of the gone, what would you reach for first? Would you reach for the pen, the one you use to sign things for other people, or the voice you packed away because people told you it was too much? Would you keep peace at any cost, or would you ask the room to listen while you learned how to say, "I'm not finished"? I am not finished. Not with this story, not with this town, not with the children who know where truth hides and are brave enough to carry it into the light. And if you are reading this far away or close enough to smell the salt on my sweater, I hope you are not finished either.